Gulf of Mexico is one of the most significant geographical features of the Americas, playing a pivotal role in history, exploration, and commerce. Its name, Gulf of Mexico, carries a rich history rooted in Spanish exploration, conquest, and cartography. The term Gulf of Mexico emerged from Spain's exploration and conquest of the Americas, particularly its subjugation of the Aztec Empire and the establishment of New Spain. Early maps helped standardize the name, which became synonymous with Spanish dominance in the region. Before European contact, the Gulf of Mexico was home to numerous indigenous civilizations, such as the Maya, Aztecs, and the coastal tribes of what is now the southern United States. While these cultures would have had their own names for the body of water, these terms have largely been lost to history due to the dominance of European narratives. When Christopher Columbus arrived in the Americas in 1492, he did not enter the Gulf of Mexico, but set in motion Spain's exploration of the New World. The Spanish crown sponsored expeditions that soon revealed the existence of the Gulf. By the early 1500s, explorers such as Juan Ponce de León and Alonso Alvarez de Pineda began charting the Gulf's coastline. In these early years, the Gulf was referred to in vague terms such as El Mar del Sur, the Southern Sea, or simply El Golfo. As cartographers began to map the Americas, the Gulf became more defined. However, the name Gulf of America appeared on some maps, reflecting its association with the newly discovered continents, which were referred to as America in honor of the Italian explorer Amerigo Vespucci. The term Gulf of Mexico emerged from Spain's conquest of what we refer to as the Aztec Empire in the early 16th century. When Hernán Cortés landed on the eastern coast of Mexico in 1519, the Gulf was already a crucial geographical feature. Cortés established Veracruz, which became a gateway for Spanish expeditions into the interior and a critical port for the transport of goods and people. The name Mexico derived from the name Mexica, which is what the Aztecs referred to themselves. As the Spanish Empire solidified its control, the Gulf began to be associated with the term. By the 1520s, Spanish cartographers began using the term Golfo de Mexico to describe the body of water. This name became more prevalent as Spain consolidated its territorial claims in New Spain, including modern-day Mexico, Texas, and the southwestern United States, and surrounding regions. The first maps to use the term Gulf of Mexico appeared in the 1520s and 1530s. Notable examples include the Padrón Real map. This map, maintained by Spanish cartographers such as Juan de la Cosa, included early references to the Gulf as part of the larger maritime geography of New Spain. Diego Ribero's 1529 world map prominently labeled the Gulf as Golfo de Mexico, reflecting the increasing specificity of Spanish cartography. By the mid-16th century, the term Gulf of Mexico had become standardized on Spanish maps, solidifying its name in European geography. Exploration of the Gulf of Mexico's coastline played a critical role in Spain's conquest of the Americas. Maritime expeditions were crucial for mapping the region and establishing control over key territories, including the modern-day United States Gulf Coast. In 1519, Alonso Alvarez de Pineda became the first European to map the coastline of the Gulf of Mexico, including what is now Texas. His expedition provided valuable information about the region's geography and resources. De Pineda's maps depicted the Gulf as a continuous waterway, connecting the Spanish territories in Florida, Mexico, and the Caribbean. Alvarez de Pineda's mapping expedition in 1519 was a groundbreaking journey that marked one of the earliest European explorations of the Gulf Coast of America. Setting sail from Jamaica, the expedition sought to explore and map new territories, search for a westward passage to Asia, and assert Spanish territorial claims in the New World. Setting sail from Cuba with a small fleet, Alvarez de Pineda charted approximately 800 miles of the Gulf of Mexico coastline, creating some of the first detailed maps of the region. His work included documenting the Texas coastline, though there is no evidence he made significant landings there. The maps produced during the expedition were notable for their accuracy, and were among the earliest to depict the Gulf Coast and its major rivers, disproving the myth of a direct water route to Asia from the Gulf of Mexico. Throughout the voyage, Alvarez de Pineda and his crew interacted with several indigenous peoples, encountering both friendly tribes with whom they traded and hostile ones that led to skirmishes. At one point during their exploration, the expedition came into contact with Hernán Cortés and his forces, who were in the midst of the conquest of the Aztec Empire. This encounter underscored the fierce competition among Spanish expeditions as they vied for territory and resources in the New World. The expedition returned to Jamaica, but Alvarez de Pineda's life ended shortly thereafter under unclear circumstances. Some reports suggest he died during conflicts with indigenous groups in Central America. Despite his relatively obscure legacy compared to figures like Cortés, his achievements were significant. The maps he created laid the groundwork for future Spanish explorations and strengthened Spain's claims to the Gulf Coast region, playing a crucial role in the early European understanding of North America's geography. Following Alvarez de Pineda's mapping expedition, explorers such as Pánfilo de Narvaez and Álvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca ventured into the region. Pánfilo de Narvaez and Álvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca are two Spanish explorers whose fates became intertwined during one of the most infamous expeditions in the history of the Spanish exploration of the Americas. In 1527, Pánfilo de Narvaez led an ambitious expedition authorized by the Spanish crown to explore and claim territory in what is now the southeastern United States. With 5 ships and about 600 men, including Álvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca, Narvaez set out from Spain with grand plans to establish colonies and find riches. However, the expedition was plagued by mistakes almost from the start. Storms, navigational errors, and hostile encounters with indigenous peoples decimated their ranks. Landing somewhere near Tampa Bay in 1528, Narvaez made the fateful decision to split his forces, sending his ships ahead while he led the main party inland to explore. This decision proved disastrous, as they became lost in the harsh and unfamiliar wilderness of Florida. With supplies dwindling and tensions rising, the men attempted to construct makeshift rafts to escape by sea, aiming to reach the Spanish settlements in Mexico. These rafts, however, were ill-suited for the Gulf waters, and many were lost to storms. Narvaez himself disappeared at sea, leaving the remnants of his expedition stranded and leaderless. Among the survivors was Cabeza de Vaca, who, along with a small group of men, washed ashore on the coast of Texas. Over the next 8 years, Cabeza de Vaca would endure an extraordinary journey across the American Southwest and northern Mexico. Captured and enslaved by indigenous groups, he eventually gained freedom, living as a trader and healer among different tribes. Cabeza de Vaca and 3 companions, including an African slave named Estevanico, finally reached Spanish settlements in Mexico in 1536, becoming some of the first Europeans to traverse this vast region. Cabeza de Vaca later documented his experiences in his memoir, La Relación, later known as Naufragios, or shipwrecks. His account provides valuable insights into the cultures and lives of the indigenous peoples he encountered, as well as the harsh realities of survival in an unfamiliar land. His story stands in stark contrast to Narvaez's ill-fated leadership and ultimate demise, highlighting the resilience and endurance required to endure the challenges of early exploration in the Americas. Another early Spanish foray into what is now the United States Gulf Coast was led by Hernando de Soto in 1539 to 1542. De Soto's expedition, which first landed in Florida, aimed to find gold and establish Spanish control over what is now the southeastern United States. Hernando de Soto's arrival in the Tampa Bay area marked the beginning of one of the most ambitious and harrowing explorations of what is now the Gulf Coast of the United States. This region, known for its lush, untamed landscapes and diverse indigenous cultures, served as the starting point for de Soto's arduous expedition in search of wealth and glory. De Soto and his fleet of 9 ships, over 600 men, 220 horses, and an assortment of supplies, made landfall on the western coast of Florida near modern-day Tampa Bay. This was a strategic choice due to its navigable waters and reports of rich inland territories. The bay, lined with mangroves and dotted with small islands, appeared both inviting and mysterious. The shimmering waters teemed with fish, while the dense forests echoed with the calls of strange birds. Upon landing, De Soto's men constructed a base camp, unloading their horses and supplies to prepare for their inland journey. The humid air and thick vegetation presented immediate challenges to the Spanish, who were unaccustomed to the subtropical climate and the swarms of mosquitoes that descended upon them. The word mosquito comes from the Spanish and Portuguese languages, where it means little fly. The Tampa region's natural beauty was unlike anything the Spanish had seen before. Towering pine forests, oak hammocks, and vast swamplands stretched across the horizon, creating a verdant tapestry. The Spanish noted the abundance of wildlife, including deer, wild turkeys, alligators, and countless birds, some with plumage so vibrant they seemed otherworldly. Rivers and estuaries were alive with fish, crabs, and oysters, which the natives harvested skillfully. The land appeared fertile, with wild fruits like plums, persimmons, and berries growing in abundance. De Soto recognized the agricultural potential of the region, though his primary focus remained on extracting wealth from the local populations. According to De Soto's own account, "This land is a paradise of untapped riches. The forests are alive with creatures of every kind, deer that leap with unearthly grace, bears that lumber through the woods, and great reptiles that dwell in the swamps, their eyes glowing like embers in the night. The rivers teem with fish, from the sleek gar to the monstrous sturgeon, their scales shining like armor. The soil is rich, yielding crops of maize, beans, and squash that could sustain entire armies. The trees bear fruits both familiar and strange, plums, figs, and persimmons that burst with flavor. Flowers of every color bloom across the fields, their petals as soft as silk." The expedition explored Florida and Georgia and the Carolinas before arriving near what is today the Floribama line, where they met Chief Tuscaloosa, a paramount chief of a Mississippian chiefdom in what is now the state of Alabama. De Soto wrote that, "The air was thick with tension as we approached the fortified village of Mobila, a settlement promised to us by Chief Tuscaloosa as a place of refuge and trade. It was anything but. Tuscaloosa, a savage of towering stature and unyielding pride, led us into this trap with the cunning of a fox. His warriors were ready, hidden behind the primitive wooden palisades of the town, a structure hastily constructed yet formidable in its simplicity. The gates of Mobila opened to us under the guise of hospitality. The villagers greeted us with calm faces, presenting us with offerings of food, including maize bread, smoked venison, and roasted fish, and gestured for us to settle within the village. But my soldiers were not blind to the underlying unease in the air. The women whispered nervously, their eyes darting to their warriors, who gripped their clubs and spears with barely restrained anticipation. Tuscaloosa, clad in ceremonial garb of feathers and animal skins, sat regally among his people. He exuded the confidence of a leader who had planned every move. Though he had initially traveled with us under duress, his composure now suggested a man who knew the tides were about to turn in his favor. As my men began to relax and unload their gear, the gate slammed shut with an echoing boom. From every direction, native warriors poured forth, their war cries reverberating like thunder through the air. These were no ordinary combatants. They were warriors of a disciplined and unified force, their bodies painted in vivid reds and blacks, their faces fierce with resolve. They wielded spears, clubs, and bows, weapons they handled with deadly precision. The Spanish were immediately thrown into chaos by the savages. The palisades of the village acted as a natural barrier, hemming us into a confined killing ground. Smoke began to rise as the natives set the buildings aflame, transforming the village into an inferno of fire and ash. The flames licked at the sky, consuming the thatched roofs of the homes, filling the air with acrid smoke that burned our lungs and obscured our vision. I barked orders for the men to form a defensive line, raising their shields and drawing their swords. Those with muskets fired volleys into the advancing crowd, the sound of gunfire like a hammer striking an anvil. But our numbers were too few, and our powder supply limited. The native warriors came in waves, undeterred by their losses. Every time one fell, another rose to take his place. Our horses, trained for battle, became panicked in the tight quarters, their hooves kicking out wildly. A few were felled by the natives, who targeted them with spears and flaming arrows. Without the full advantage of our cavalry, we were at a severe disadvantage. Tuscaloosa's warriors used the terrain to their advantage, pressing us against the walls of the fort. Their clubs struck with bone-crushing force, and their spears pierced through the gaps in our armor. My soldiers fought bravely, their swords flashing in the firelight as they defended one another with the ferocity of cornered animals. Amid the chaos, the Christian flag of Spain was raised high above our defensive line, its presence a rallying point for our beleaguered forces. Though we were vastly outnumbered, the sight of the flag renewed our faith. Priests accompanying the expedition shouted prayers, their voices drowned out by the cacophony of battle. Hours passed, though it felt like days. The sun began to dip below the horizon, and finally, the tide of attackers began to wane. Their bodies lay scattered across the battlefield, mingled with those of my fallen men. The ground was slick with blood, and the acrid stench of death hung heavy in the air. Mabila was reduced to ashes, the village consumed entirely by the flames the natives themselves had set. Chief Tuscaloosa was nowhere to be found. Whether he perished in the inferno or fled into the wilderness we could not say. His people had fought with a determination that could only come from the defense of their homes and families. It was a lesson in their resolve, one that would stay with me for the rest of my journey. The wooden walls of Mabila, so simple and primitive, had held against the might of Spain, a testament to the ingenuity of these people. The firelight cast long shadows across the forest, the trees standing as silent witnesses to the carnage that had unfolded. De Soto's troops were the first and nearly the last Europeans to see Mississippian tribes and civilizations. Later, during his journey, De Soto and his men navigated rivers and crossed the Mississippi River, becoming the first Europeans to document it. Although the expedition did not find gold, it provided valuable information about the geography. Later, Spain established a presence in Alabama through the founding of settlements such as Mobile, Alabama, and Pensacola, Florida. Pensacola, founded in 1698, served as an important port for Spanish ships navigating the Gulf of Mexico. These settlements were part of Spain's broader strategy to secure its territorial claims and protect its shipping routes. By the 17th century, Spain's control of the Gulf of Mexico was instrumental in maintaining its empire. Spanish galleons traversed the Gulf, transporting silver, goods, and people between Mexico, the Caribbean, and Spain. The Gulf also served as a defensive barrier against rival European powers, especially France and England. After acquiring Louisiana from France in 1763 through the Treaty of Paris, Spain controlled the region until 1800.